Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Wow, I'm moving a little slower this morning, if I'm honest with you.
Yes, I'm just coming off the heels of beach camp and kids camp and VBS, and a mission trip, the gauntlet of June at my church.
And coming out of a national convention for me.
Woo!
So anyway, this is the time we're supposed to slow down, but this is just going. But as Josh said, the life of ministry in the summer, it's like every ministry leader needs a reprieve or a long vacation just to get over everybody else's vacations. Marianne, you just came back from a vacation. How was it?
Oh, Colorado has my heart.
Oh, nice.
There's something about the mountains and the cooler air. I'm a Texas girl, so to escape the Texas heat has been really nice. But just, experiencing nature and mountains, and my kids are getting older, so adventure on vacation looks different. So we enjoyed our time quite a bit. It was fun.
What was the major temperature difference between Texas and Colorado the whole time you were there? How many degrees difference on average was it?
Oh my goodness. Well, 42 in the mornings and max 75 in the late afternoon. So, and in Texas, it's 99, 100, 110.
Yeah. It has been brutally warm this time of year for everybody. Well, we're going to be dealing with grandparenting today. And we're going to talk about that. We rotate this topic in more and more frequently. We're seeing the multiple generations experiencing grandparenting right now. Gen Xers are big up on that list, and more and more of them are experiencing grandparenting. And Dr. Chris Shirley is going to be our guest today as he deals with this time. I want to give you a thought, and I want to ask you both a question as it relates to your parents, who are the grandparents of your kiddos. One thing I've noticed about this newness, my wife and I are about 6-7 months into this grandparenting. So, Josh, you said off the air, we were waiting. I think we might even be dipping our toe. We might not even be up to the waiting point, but it does feel real and it does feel incredible. But one thing I'm noticing even at this stage is how quickly she grows and develops. Mm-hmm. And when I apply that to grandparenting principles, here's the question I fear and I've observed with my own parents. Sometimes kids outpace the comfort level of grandparents. Mm-hmm. In other words, grandparents do a good job relating when they're pretty tiny, maybe even in the childhood development stages. But about the time they're getting up to middle school, grandparents have no clue how to relate, how to connect. And oftentimes it shows up and the kids don't want to go to grandparents' house anymore. Does that relate to you guys at all? Have you met with your parents?
Yes, it's so interesting you're saying that. I watched this happen this summer. My kids are 10 and 14. So just exactly what you're mentioning in terms of development. And it was really interesting. Early in our vacation, their grandfather requested that they didn't bring their phone to the table and that we sat through an entire meal having a conversation. So they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner sitting down at the table. That's part of their culture. That's part of who they are. And that's very different for us. And so it was just really neat for the groundwork to be laid early in the vacation so that, my kids, they kind of wanted to hurry through their breakfast and get back to their screens. I'm just being straight up honest with you guys. I battle the same thing all of you battle. But he requested that they stay sitting at the table. And, I think they're fighting to figure out how to connect. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I do appreciate the effort. And my boys were very responsive. And to be honest with you, we had a 2-week vacation this year, and watching them adjust to that request, because that's not something they're used to. So it's something they had to, kind of adjust to, was a powerful thing because the conversations were powerful. So it's interesting. I appreciate the fight to connect. And that's really what I feel like we get to hear in this podcast is to be intentional as grandparents.
Now, did your kiddos do better in the beginning than at the end of that time with yours? Or tell the progression or digression, if we would.
Honestly, there was a lot of resistance in the beginning. There was a lot of redirection, and really not from us, really more from their grandparents. And we kind of let that. We're here in their second home, and we're on their terms and their turf, and they get to kind of draw the boundary lines. And that's kind of the nature of how we roll there. And so it was, they were resistant in the beginning. They wanted to hurry back to their screens because, to be honest with you guys, Chad and I we don't value breakfast time. I'll just say it like that. Our family, we value dinner time. We spend intentional family time around the dinner table, but breakfast is powdered donuts, dry cereal, fend for yourself in our house. Yeah. And I do think that's generational.
Yes, for sure.
So they settled in, after a few days and realized, okay, this is important to Pop, so we need to honor him.
My parents passed away early on in life, so my kids did not know their grandparents from my side. But with my wife's parents, specifically Lena's dad, Ryman is an old soul. My son is an old soul and loves to yard sale and go to flea markets and estate sales. So he is a grandpa's dream kid. So they have no problems connecting whatsoever. I mean, they will spend Saturday mornings with each other and call, I found this at a yard sale. What do you think about it? They just have no problems connecting on that point. And Lena's stepmother has, her and Hannah do a great job of communicating and connecting because they're very intentional about not making sure the kids are interested in what they are, but more finding out what the interests of our kids are and seeking those opportunities out, whether it's, shopping or sports or whatever hobbies that they may be into. They'll find themselves trying to learn about that. And I think that's what Dr. Shirley really does a good job of touching on, is the intentionality of the whole thing.
Absolutely. Josh, I'm going to tease a future podcast with an item here. You mentioned Ryman being an old soul, and Ryman is how old right now, Josh?
He just turned 17.
17. So that may sound foreign to many of our listeners that he loves yard sales and flea markets. But this is a tease. So Josh, without going into any detail now, I want you to answer this question for our people. Your son knows how to find the most odd item at a flea market yard sale and pay $2 for something, and then turn around and he sells it online for 50 or 60 or some. So I want them to understand your son has an entrepreneur's mind. Tell them, without going into tons of detail, what's the lowest priced item and what did he most sell it for that's appropriate for our audience here.
And can I chime in real quick and just say, mamas out there from the 90s, this kid found a New Kids on the Block t-shirt from the 90s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He has an eye. And the funny thing is that's probably one of the more expensive items he had. He thought, well, who likes New Kids on the Block? And my wife, Lena, said, hold on, I'm going to throw this out to the Mom Squad on Facebook. And I think he paid $2 for that t-shirt and got $100 for it.
Oh, wow. There we go.
Yeah.
So he's just got this entrepreneur's mind in there and does so. And here's what I want grandparents to think about. Dr. Shirley's going to give you ideas that really cost you nothing, but you're going to be able to turn this thing back around into bank with your kids if you just follow intentional steps. So I want you to listen to Dr. Shirley. When we come back from the break, David Jones will be interviewing him. And I want to remind the audience that this interview took place at the D6 conference. And this interview has a little more background noise than most, but you'll want to stay tuned. Whether you're a grandparent or not, you'll want to pass these tips along to the grandparents in your ministry. Maybe you want to share this podcast with all the grandparents in your church. But this is a cool set of ideas on intentional connecting when we come back from the break.
Our team at D6 have put together top family ministry resources that will help you do family ministry well. We call it D6 Plus, an online monthly subscription for every age and stage of ministry. Adult, youth, and children's leaders can now enjoy ready-to-use family ministry resources and training from the team at D6 Family. What can you expect with D6 Plus? First, you get the D6 conference year-round, with a media library filled with main stage talks and breakout sessions from every year of the D6 conference. D6 Plus also provides teacher training videos and emails to help your team excel at family ministry. D6 Plus includes a toolbox of one-page talking sheets to guide families through pain points. D6 Plus also offers sermons and lesson outlines, countdown videos, and creative graphics. In addition to the resources and training provided online, D6 Plus members receive other perks, family ministry books sent directly to you throughout the year for free, plus special VIP benefits at the D6 conference. D6 Plus, family ministry resources and training to help you and the parents in your church have an excellent family ministry.
Dr. Chris Shirley serves as Professor of Educational Ministries and Associate Dean of the Jack D. Terry School of Educational Ministries at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is the author of Family Ministry in the Church, A Leader's Guide to Ministry Through the Family, and is also a frequent conference speaker, specializing in discipleship, family ministry, and older adult ministry. Dr. Shirley and his wife Isabel have 2 grown children, 2 children-in-law, and 3 grandchildren. Dr. Shirley, I'm so glad you're with us today.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Let me correct you on one of those things.
Oh, yes.
We have 4 grandchildren now.
4?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
As of December 23rd.
That is great.
Yeah. Number 4.
And that kind of is great for the topic we're talking about today, because
Exactly.
we're talking about grandparents as disciple makers. Mm-hmm. This is a topic we hear so many people just asking us about, saying, what role do grandparents play? How can I play a role in my children's lives? And so I'm so glad to talk to you about this, because this is such a need in the church and it's such a need in the home. I love this topic so much because I was fortunate enough to have grandparents who invested in me from the time I was born. And this may sound like an obvious question, but I think it's important to lay the groundwork here. Why are grandparents so important when it comes to family discipleship?
Well, I think it's important from 2 directions. I think first and foremost, it's important to the family themselves, to parents who are raising kids in the home, and having a team approach to that process. And so one of the reasons why it's important that grandparents be involved in this is because of the issue of legacy. Family is about history. Family is about legacy. Family, for good or for bad, has a past to it and has a future to it. And I think anytime that we can pull together members of the family onto the discipleship team, then we're expanding our influence and we're expanding the possibilities and the relationships that child has in their lives. People with different gifts and different personalities, and the ability to connect with children in different ways. And so I think from one standpoint, it's important to the family themselves with children. I think it's also important to the grandparents as well. I think we've seen study after study shows that longevity is really based on purposefulness. The more purpose we have in our lives, the more we are greater well-being, and we are healthier, and we have a sense of usefulness in our lives. And so I think from the grandparent standpoint, it's also an obedience to Scripture as well. Not only were the parents commanded to teach their children, but then you're also commanded to teach your children's children as well. So I think we have a biblical foundation for this as well.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in one of your breakout sessions here at the D6 conference that this generation of grandparents is seeking greater impact in the lives of their children, their grandchildren. What is it about this generation of grandparents that makes them unique?
Okay, parents today, and I guess it would be maybe the younger Gen Xers and even into the millennials, kind of gotten a bad rap as the helicopter parents, and the stealth bomber parents, and those who just have such a tight grip on their kids and control over their kids, and yet they didn't learn that in a vacuum. They learned that from their parents who were baby boomers, and I think we see a generational shift in parenting that happened with the baby boomers that this generation wanted to be heavily involved in their children's lives. They wanted to be their children's friends. They wanted to have a close connection with them. They wanted to understand their interests and be involved in their life. And as they did so much to be involved in their lives, now that they're grandparents, I think they want that same thing for the most part. This generation of grandparents, if they're following the trend of the baby boomers, then they are desiring, I think, to have that closer connection. I see it anecdotally, among my friends who are grandparents, and the way in which they connect with their grandkids, want to be with their grandkids, make their grandkids a priority in their life, which my grandparents never did that. They loved me, they were a part of our family, but being closely connected at every level of life was just not something we did.
Yeah, well, from a practical standpoint, kind of the nuts and bolts of everything, how does this aspect of discipleship play out? Where are you seeing it happen in a practical sense? What does that look like? Can you kind of give some examples to help people know, this is what it does look like?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, one example is, I guess, an example of necessity. There are many grandparents out there now who are the spiritual leaders for their grandchildren.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, prodigal kids and other situations in their family, we find that more and more grandkids are not only raising children, but I'm also seeing more and more grandchildren who are being the primary influencer spiritually. They're the ones bringing them to church. They're the ones who are connecting with them on a spiritual level and seeking to disciple them in the best way. And so that's one way it plays out in that when parents aren't there, the grandparents must step in and fill that role. I think, and I'll use myself as an example for the other side of that. When I've got 4 grandchildren and 2 kids and 2 kids-in-law that love their kids, are with their kids, and enjoy being family together, and we're part of the team, but we're not the primary spiritual influencers, and we need to know that. So, one of the ways we do that, and I know this sounds really churchy, but pray.
Yeah.
How do we do this? We pray. First and foremost, we are on our knees praying for our grandkids, praying for our children, watching them grow, talking to them regularly. I had a conversation with my grandson the other day, who's 5 years old, and we were talking about church and what he was learning and stuff like that. And he said, "Pop, what is the Trinity?" and so I tried to explain to him. He said, "How could Jesus be God?" And so we talked for about 5 minutes. That's about all he could handle, with it. But that's just one example of the type of conversations that I'm regularly trying to have with my grandkids, and seeing where they're at, what God's doing in their life. So praying for them, having conversations with them that are spiritually intentional. I think also continuing to disciple my own kids. That doesn't stop.
Yeah.
When they leave the house, when they have their own kids, I'm still pouring into my kids' lives and talking with them and trying to help guide them in their decision making and in the raising of their kids and how they're doing that and how that affects their own walk with Christ. So yeah, I think praying, talking with them, continuing to disciple my kids. Those are three things I think that are important. There are many others, but
I want to bring up the people in this age group who either don't have kids or don't have grandkids, or they don't have their grandkids close to them. What is their role when it comes to being disciple makers?
Yeah, an important role, I think. And when I talk to grandparents about this, I'll typically get that scenario from them. They said, "What do we do? We live a day away. It'll take 9 hours, 10 hours. It takes a plane trip from California to Florida, to connect or to be with my grandkids. How can I be significant to them in their walk with Christ and in their spiritual walk?" And so there are some ways that they can do that. Of course, praying with them, talking with them, making access of technology. In communicating with them by Facebook, by FaceTime. Shows my age too. Through FaceTime and other video platforms where they can regularly talk with them and share with them. It's in, I think, having a chance to share their testimony with your grandkids, is important for both grandparents and parents, but sharing their testimonies, what God's doing in their life with their grandkids. Also, I think writing letters to them. I get the same reaction from people when I talk about this letter writing thing, because it's such a lost art.
Oh yeah.
In our society today. But Paul liked to write letters, so I think maybe we ought to be thinking, well, that's an important skill we ought to have with our family. And one of the things that we can't do one-on-one when we're talking, particularly over technology, is to say everything we want to say. And so I encourage grandparents to start a letter writing schedule with their grandkids and begin early and continue on through their growing up years, where they're hearing from their grandparents regularly, and their grandparents are sharing scriptures with them. Their grandparents are sharing testimony items. Their grandparents are sharing their prayers for them in those letters. Something they can hold on to, something they can put in their drawers and come back to later. Something that will be meaningful to them in the years ahead as they're growing and changing and developing. So I think that's another thing as well. So yeah, those are just some ideas that come to mind.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really practical, and that's something I wish I had, because that's really, really good idea. There was an older man who I consider to be one of my mentors. He once told me that he felt like he couldn't connect with young people anymore because of the age difference. And I told him that's the only thing he ever said to me that I disagreed with. And I told him there are hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds of college students and teenagers who will disagree with you on that, because yes, you do. You invest in us. You love us. But what would you say to those who worry that maybe they're too old and they can't connect with younger generations, and they're apprehensive about even making that connection?
Yeah, I would probably first point to what we find in research today. When we survey younger adults, millennials, and now into Gen Z, what we find is an openness to older adults that was not there when I was their age. There's a sense of loss, I think, in the guidance from older people in their lives, because we're so tribalized and we're so segmented and compartmentalized in our lives, only spending time with people that are our age or around our age, and we get, even in the church, we get very little interaction among the generations.
Yeah.
And so, one thing that I would tell them is that they want it. I think that giving them permission is important. Because most of the time they're thinking those kids don't want me in their lives. And my message is, from what we know now and what we hear from these generations, they want you in their lives. Now go after it. And so that's one thing is to recognize that they want this in their life. They need it in their lives. I think the second thing is to challenge them with, I guess, maybe a Caleb challenge, that at whatever age we're at, God still has a purpose and a mission for us ahead. I was talking about this, in fact, at church the other day, and someone asked me, at this time in your life, that means you're getting old, said, where are you at right now in your walk with Christ, and what's important to you? And I said, what's important to me is investing in people who are younger than I am. I said, and the reason is this, and this is what I think we need to challenge older adults with, is that you've spent your entire life being poured into. You've been given and given and given, and now your glass is full, and let's imagine it's a glass of milk, and we allow a glass of milk to sit on the counter. What happens to it? It curdles, it sours, and it is no longer useful for what it was intended to do, which is to nourish and to bring life. And we drink the milk, so that our bodies might be nourished, our bones might be built up, and we might be healthy. And if we imagine our life in this way, we see that glass of our life has been filled to the brim throughout our life, and we've got to use that. We've got to pour into other people's lives. And so that's a challenge to them as well. And I think, too, we need to be working with church leaders more. And the church leaders have to understand the importance of intergenerational contact. I had an older gentleman not too long ago come up and say, I want to mentor, but who is it? I have no relationships. And when I come to church, they put me in this class. They send me on these activities. I'm always around old people. Where am I going to find these young people to build relationships with? And to that end, it's like, well, church leaders, that's our problem. That's our fault. We have not seen the necessity and the importance of pulling people together into intergenerational relationships, out of which these relationships can form between younger and older.
I really like what you said. And as a millennial, I agree with what you said, because we log on to social media, we log on to Twitter, and there's just so much noise, and there's so much bad advice, and there's something so comforting about being able to talk to someone who's older and wiser, who is spiritually mature, who can pour into us and give us the wisdom we need, rather than hearing the world's voice telling us the complete opposite. And so I love what you said there, because I believe it is so true that people my age, people younger, we're craving that relationship, and we're craving that mentorship, and I love that.
And we can start with our grandkids.
Yes.
We can start there.
Yeah, that's great. As we close, I would love for you to speak directly to the grandparents who are listening and just offer them a word of encouragement as it relates to generational discipleship.
I guess it would be a simple message, really, that you can do it. You can do it. And then I would also warn them as well. If you don't do it, what are the consequences?
Wow. Yeah.
If we don't step up and provide our part in this, if we just step back and allow a generation to grow up and come along without any contact or influence from us, then whatever results we get, we deserve. And I think we've seen it already playing out, because I can't help but think that when we look at the surveys and we see the numbers of young adults who are abandoning the church and abandoning their faith and saying, no, I'm not just switching to another religion, I'm not switching to another denomination, I'm just throwing it all away. I'm walking away from it. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. That happens through the impact and effect of their parents, through the impact and effect of their grandparents, and all of those who should be on that team carrying that water. And so that would be my challenge, both positively and a warning.
Well, Dr. Shirley, thank you for sharing this with us. Just a great challenge for grandparents. I think really a great challenge for anybody of any age about what discipleship looks like and what it means and who we allow to pour into our lives and whose lives we can pour into. Thank you so much for this message, and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, that was just a powerful podcast. And to be honest with you, Ron, as I was listening to it, I wrote a couple of pages down because I was so blessed by his challenge. But I thought about the legacy journal, the generational legacy journal that was just released that you actually authored, and was just thinking, I need to get those in the hands of my mother and my husband's parents. Because I just want to make sure that they are capturing moments and sharing life stories with my children. And so I loved his challenge of intentionality. I think my big takeaway, my big starred item from the sound bite from the podcast was church leaders need to mobilize older adults.
Yeah.
I'm so challenged by that. And I love that. My husband's a pastor, and I partner with him in ministry, and I love that he is turning our attention to thinking about, generational discipleship in that way, that they want to invest. They just need us to give them an onboarding or a ramp for them to invest.
Yeah, thanks for that mention in there. I agree that onboarding, that connecting. He talked about letter writing. I think that naturally took me back to the journal as well. And for our listeners who are not familiar with the journal, it's called About You, About Me, Generational Legacy Journal. And every one of you have a story to tell, and it's your own story and the story of your child or grandchild. And if you pick up this journal, it provides these prompt questions very much along the lines of what Dr. Shirley said about writing letters to your kids by answering the questions that's prompting, like, what was your favorite this? Or if your child was a Bible character, which one does he or she most remind you of in Bible characters? And you use this to speak into their lives in some really powerful ways. And again, the intentionality of that. And Dr. Shirley said this was one of my favorite quotes, was longevity produces more purpose. Which, again, breeds back to that intentionality with connecting older adults, with younger kids, whether it's around prayer campaigns, adoption campaigns, whatever we're going to do, being much more intentional in there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love the fact that he touched on that this younger generation is more apt to the influence and listening to older generations and not just casting them out, but recognizing the value of their experience and they're wanting to hear that. I love he used, like you said, the letter writing, but also utilizing, technology for those that are discipling from a distance and using both extremes and how they can live in both of those worlds and take those experiences and be able to communicate them through, goodness gracious, Facebook now. More grandparents are on Facebook and utilizing that to tell their story and to disciple their kids through their testimonies. What is God doing? That's what I love, being intentional about pointing your kids to Jesus and letting them know this is where I'm, not only where I saw God in my younger years, but where am I seeing God and how am I seeing him now, and how you as my grandchild are opening my eyes to new experiences and showing me, new things about God that I didn't know. And it just, I love the fact that the milk illustration, if you leave it out on the counter, it goes bad. But if you take care of it and you put it and refrigerate it, it still can give life. It's to nourish and build your bones. And we are to do that too, not just pulling from canned fruit, as Jim Wideman would say, or old fruit, but there's a reason people go to the farmer's market. They want stuff fresh in season. So as grandparents, continuing to point to what God is doing fresh and new in their lives is pretty cool.
Can I just speak into the fact that I've got a 14-year-old and we're in that season of life where we are inviting the village, the village's voices of discipleship. And sometimes he can't hear mom and dad's voice at 14. It's an interesting dynamic. They literally cannot hear us. But I will tell you, my mother has great impact and influence on Xander. And so when he can't hear me, he can hear her. And so I just want to challenge all the grandparents out there listening, that God has a purpose for you, and your grandchildren do hear you. They do listen to you. You do have a voice, and you can impact your family greatly with your voice and with your wisdom.
Yeah, I want to remind ministry leaders that are listening how many grandparents are raising their grandchildren as the primary caregiver. Dr. Shirley alluded to this, and it's a big deal. And it's probably whether or not their children are in play or not. Oftentimes, the grandparents in your church are the only ones raising them spiritually. But many of them are also raising them in large percentages. So check that out. See how you can equip them. And I want to remind our listeners that grandparenting is only one chapter in Dr. Shirley's book. He kind of opened up this door because we don't have as many people speaking into the grandparent ministry in the bigger umbrella of family ministry. And so we always try to tap his expertise on this. But if you want to dive further into his book, and I want to tell you that his book is widely read by ministry leaders around the country and used as a textbook in several seminaries and universities. The title of his book is Family, Ministry, and the Church. Dr. Shirley wrote the largest portion of the book, but he has a handful of guest authors that write with him. Some of them you would recognize, like Dr. Richard Ross wrote a chapter, Dr. Brian Haynes wrote a chapter, Karen Kinnemer wrote a chapter, and a couple more in there also wrote a chapter. And this is a vital, I would say, a core book that you want to pick up. And only one of those chapters deals with grandparenting. So if you want a well-rounded book on family ministry for helping people understand the direction of intentionality among all generations, pick up Dr. Shirley's book, Family, Ministry, and the Church. Next week, we're going to have Mary Blosser. And I got a chance to meet Mary Blosser 2 or 3 years ago and found this lady has been the key catalyst and instrument in leading her church into a family ministry dynamic church. And she, I don't know how to tactfully say this, she is a sage, wonderful lady. But you would think that somebody who's going to lead a church into this might be the lead pastor or a young ministry leader that's, dynamic and so forth. Well, she's dynamic in her own way. But at this stage of life, I think she's going to get credit for some major generational impact. And she's got some great insight for how they did it. And they're an average church, and they're going to be able to help you think this thing through. So next week, we'll be with Mary Blosser and the interview there. Until then, we're going to be praying for you that you have a great ministry week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.